Select Board. We'll start with Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Is the sound okay?
It is now. Yeah,
Okay, great, thank you.
sorry about that.
That's fine. Great. Do we have any minutes to approve?
Yes. We have meeting minutes for June. So these are meeting minutes for June 2nd, and everybody was present.
Okay, great. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes as written.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
That's all in favor, so the motion passes. We have no additions to the agenda. We have no appointments. So we'll go right into discussion and action items. The first being what we do every year as a board, which is to assign liaison duties. Do you want to open this, Steve, with anything?
No, just that this is, as you mentioned, routine. It's an annual process. After every election, we typically sit down. First order of business is the select board will reorganize, which you did at the last meeting, and then the second order of business is to assign liaisonships to each member. And then generally sometime after that, we start talking about goals and objectives, which is also an introductory discussion for tonight, so.
Perfect, thank you, Steve. So all liaisonships are open with the exception of the Capital Improvement Planning Committee, EDIC, and Law Account, which I'm taking. So we can start with the Agricultural Commission?
Before we start, is there any way we can possibly condense some of the committees, or do we talk about that now? Is that even the
Oh, you had brought that up at the last
if that
meeting.
was something we could bring up before we?
What ones are you thinking?
So like, I was thinking like BCTV could go under communications. Like we could have Parks, Recs, and Lakes all under one committee. Something like that. I'm just throwing an idea out
Cable
there.
services
Yeah.
under BCTV.
CTV. Is that a thought?
Steve?
Um,
I mean, it seems to me like the Lakes Committee likes their autonomy.
yeah, I think it would, well, I think it's a viable option. It's something that we should probably discuss. I do think we have a lot of committees and potentially overlap. I think taking this in steps would be more appropriate. I think we need to assign the liaisons first, have the liaisons talk to those committees, see what their opinions are, because we don't want to have volunteers feel like they're being slighted in any way.
Yeah.
We certainly would like to have their input, but I agree with you that some of these make a lot of logical sense to put together.
I think that's it. I think those are the steps, because we want to socialize the idea with the different committees. They may be open to it, they may not be, but I think we have to be careful not to alienate people who are volunteering their time for a specific thing they care about. But
That makes sense, no? Yeah.
I know, but I also really appreciate what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
And Steve, I like what you said, you know, like,
Yeah,
do the liaisonships and then, if you're the liaison, talk to the group, see if they're even open to it,
Mhm.
and then what that might look like.
so I think with that in mind, maybe the way we should work this is common themes go together so that each liaison can work with the various committees that we would consider combining. And it's not always easy to combine a committee. There may be reasons not to, but in the end, it would be the select board's decision unless there was some other bylaw or legislation creating that committee. So that would help. The members could report back.
Yeah, I think practical considerations are, if we have two boards with their own chair and committee members, but I think it's a worthy endeavor. Other thoughts?
Do you mean groupings?
Yeah, like it'd be groupings, like, I'm just using communication for example, I'd be like, like BCTV be a subcommittee in there. They would still be volunteering, it would just be called like a subcommittee or.
Like, so you're actually talking about combining the committees, not like grouping them together. Like, if you
No,
were
combining
taking the
them.
communications committee, you're also, it makes sense to have
That makes sense too, what he just said,
BCTV.
that,
Sorry. Are they
Well,
saying the same?
yeah, I had suggested grouping to begin with so that the liaisons could get to know the committees before we combine them. One thing I didn't mention earlier is that prior to the Town Manager Act, we had liaisons to all operating departments. That was eliminated as part of that act. Jen would probably remember, I think you were here as part of that discussion. BCTV might actually be an operations department now that we have a full-time director. So that, I don't know, I mean, I think tonight we should move forward with assigning somebody to it, but I think in the future it may drop off, so we need to think about that as well.
And later on in the conversation, I mean, I think this is still new, relatively new, the town manager position, so there are going to be things we uncover, things we think about that we'll have to address until we really, we're the pioneers of this change, and Steve is the change. So as we'll learn as we go. Anything else? Okay. So starting off with the Ag Commission.
I'm open to taking that.
Okay. Everybody? Animal Control Advisory Board,
I'd like to keep that.
BCTV.
sure.
Do we want to like say, sorry, I'm just point of
Yes.
clarification. Do
Yeah.
people want to say what they're interested in taking to see if there's overlap and if there's ones that are people don't really feel attached to at all? I'm just curious because I
Well-
haven't really given it much thought
I think
about how we're doing
what
this.
I was hoping for is that anyone who has an interest,
Yeah.
they speak up.
Okay.
As we go down the list,
Got it.
and if at the end,
Right.
there's a sense that well, wait, I've decided I really want that, and you can have this, and fine.
Okay.
But
It's fine.
that's where I was coming from. So
And then will we do an audit at the end to make sure nobody has like 12?
we could do that. You'll help me keep score. Okay.
I shall.
All right, so, anyone else for, BCTV, or is John the winner? Okay. Belchertown Age and Dementia Friendly Implementation Group.
I have an interest in that.
And that is separate from the senior center.
So senior center is operational.
Oh, so this is the equivalent.
Yeah.
Got it.
Council on Aging.
Oh, there's also the Council on Aging. Got it.
But, yeah.
And the other thing I can do is I can put a hold on, and we can go back if there are,
Sure.
so, did you have an interest in that too?
I was thinking it might be useful for me to expand to our senior citizens in some capacity, but Council on Aging would also be fine.
Okay. So do you want me to put a hold on this, or are you, we'll see how it goes.
Nicole, do you have a preference between them?
I'm of the same
Same thing.
strategy as you,
Yeah.
in that I really wanted to work with Council on Aging this year as well.
Okay.
Okay, so just for now, I'm gonna put a hold on that, and, when we get to it, I'll put it on hold on the other. Belchertown Overcoming Adversity Together Boat. This is a great group. I was a liaison.
Well, if nobody's interested, then I'd be interested.
Okay.
And Lisa, you'll let us know if you wanna.
Excuse me?
You'll let us know too what your interests are.
I already did, at the outset.
Sorry, I heard a few.
The EDIC, capital planning and law count, I'm taking. All the other liaisonships are open.
Got it.
Okay, so Jen, you have boat, Belchertown School Committee.
I would like to do that, but I know Nicole's also been fantastic.
I'm happy to let you grab that one if you'd like it.
I know this is an important committee. Does anyone else have any interest?
You have 2 people on the committee, or does it always have to be 1?
No, you can always go to the meeting, but
Can you
there's,
have 2 assigned liaisons, like being such a big committee, like school being such a big
I know.
part of the town, I feel like it'd be a good 2-person committee, which is a thought I had.
Nope, there's one. So I'm gonna put a hold on that. You have an interest in that too?
No, I was just thinking Nicole and Nicole's want to do it. Nicole's working on the task force, so it'd be good to see that through, that's all. I'm just thinking out loud.
It's not.
I mean, we have our joint leadership
Yeah.
meetings. I didn't feel like it was too much to be the liaison to the schools this past year. I felt like it was fine.
My other thought too, if it does transition to me, is I'm not going to be able to make every single one of their meetings. So I could write to Nicole or to you, Lisa, or anyone and say, I'm not in attendance. Would someone like to go? That way we can be hopefully more.
You know, it is important to note that they have their subcommittees, they have their school councils, and then they have their regular.
Yes.
So, although they don't book in the summer, so, you know, that's kind of counteracts with that. So.
So Steve, is that okay if she can't make a meeting that someone else can go in her stead?
I don't see why not.
Yeah. I
I'm
don't
not
see
even
why
sure if there's any restriction on having 2 liaisons if we really want that. It is a big committee.
I talked about that with my predecessor, and I thought there was just one.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any specific reason why it has to be 1, why it couldn't be 2.
Just because it's always been done that way doesn't mean it can't be changed, just saying it.
What?
We can
Such a
change
quote.
things.
We could do a liaison and an alternate, if you wanna do an alternate,
Yeah, I think I like that idea. I'm not real keen on
having 2.
2. Yeah. We
Okay.
have a ton of work to do,
Mhm.
to cover all this, but we could do a liaison and an alternate. Does anyone want to be the alternate?
I'm fine. Are you
I think
interested?
I think you'd be good. You guys are working together on that. I think it'd be good to keep it
You don't
together.
No, it's okay.
Okay.
I was just prepared
Let's
to so I just wasn't thinking about it. It's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll, so it'll be
Sorry,
Whitney.
No, you're good.
No, it's a good idea. John,
Yeah.
keep bringing up the good ideas.
Not to put us off track at all, but I just want to make sure that we are staying with the schools and talking to them about having a
Mhm.
liaison present at our meetings. I
Yes.
think it's really important.
Mhm.
Good point.
I think the same should, if they have a liaison for their finance, they come to the finance committee too. That'd be something to work with them too. Their finance liaison should come to the finance committee meetings.
I'm just gonna try to get through this. Board of Assessors,
I don't mind doing that.
okay. Branding.
Let me finish it. Please.
Branding, Belchertown Committee, Nicole,
I wanna
anybody
finish it.
else?
I mean, that should be over soonish anyway, so
Yes.
it doesn't really.
I know, I'm not taking away,
The, sorry.
Yeah.
Just 'cause it's under B, but the Buildings and Grounds Committee.
well,
don't
I
think-
have that as a question mark.
I have, alright, that's
so-
fine.
Under state school still, right?
Building and Grounds, what makes Building and Grounds different than any other committee? And why
shouldn't.
is it different?
I thought we fixed that when we changed the charge.
You-
We did.
In the packet, this is
I know, they told me
Like,
I needed
Terry
to resign
had
and like do
to
all this stuff.
swear her in for this, and I was like,
But
what?
that was,
Because you're a voting member.
but that was before we changed the charter. And I think as part of the change of the charter, we said that the select board member should be the liaison, not a voting member.
Are you a voting member right now?
Well, that's what it says in here, and I was surprised because I didn't think when I was chair I was a voting member.
No.
So Steve, you appointed, I saw that you
I wasn't
appointed
voting member. I
Jen.
wasn't on the select
There
board
wasn't
yet.
anybody.
I saw that too.
There wasn't
Yeah.
anybody
No, we didn't
on
sit
the
on the
committee.
committee.
Now there's like people on the committee. I don't need to be on the committee any
Yeah.
longer.
I think,
It's under page 3, under notes, Steve, Building and Grounds Committee. This committee is not listed on the documents as it does not have a liaison. It has a select board member on the committee as a voting member.
right,
I'm like, what?
But they have
Why
enough,
is that different than any other committee?
I will just also reiterate, they have enough members at this point. I don't need to sit on that committee.
it's just the way the committee was established. So we can look at the charge, and I guess the first question is, does the board want to continue having a voting member on the buildings and grounds? So
No.
if the answer is no, we can change the charter, or the charge, I'm sorry. I have a couple of conversations going on in my head at the same time.
Sounds difficult.
But we can change the charge
Okay,
so that it's membership only with a liaison, and if you want to do that, we'll bring it in for the next meeting so we can skip over it tonight.
well, before we skip over it, I'd like to ask if there's any interest in, in being a liaison to that.
What's the workload on that, Jen?
Yeah,
Right now,
Yeah.
nothing.
Yeah, it's pretty light right now. They expanded out to other, it used to be the Belchertown State School Buildings and Grounds Committee. That was part of the change in their charge, was to remove the state school from that. They were part of the discussions that led to the grant for the study of the reuse of the building as well as the structural integrity in the roof. Those studies are ongoing right now, and at a certain point, there's gonna be public engagement on the best reuse of the building, and they'll be part of that. But right now, they're sitting back waiting for the consultants to finish the evaluation of the building. They've also been looking at town properties to decide which ones should be surplused and sold and which ones we should retain, to make a recommendation. But that's really it for the moment. This is a committee that we've talked about combining with
Yeah.
either
Capital improvement.
capital improvement,
Yeah.
possibly the cultural district, or creative economy committee, EDIC. There's been all kinds of different,
iterations.
yeah. But right now, they're doing some work, but nothing that is time consuming.
So do we have an interest in that?
I am interested in it. Not sure if anybody else is.
Do you have an interest in that?
I mean, I would like to let them go.
Okay.
Um,
So so this won't be binding for tonight, but once we get it changed through whatever mechanism we need to get it changed through, Steve,
Nicole can be the.
Nicole, yeah,
Mhm.
Nicole is
Yeah.
the liaison.
I'll need to review the charge. We may have nothing to do.
I don't think we
just need to
do.
double check that.
But, okay,
But we can put it in the vote that,
okay.
So
Nicole will be the
Steve, you
liaison.
sent a letter to, I believe, to the clerk appointing Jen. So just letting you know. In
Yeah.
case you didn't remember that she was on, because it was a big list.
Yeah, no, I am aware of that, so.
Did you have something you were gonna say?
no.
Can I move on?
Yeah.
Cable Services Committee?
Sure. Can follow
Yeah, I
the
mean,
BCTV.
it
Sure.
makes sense, right?
Makes sense.
Clap Memorial Library?
So that one traditionally goes to the chair. This past year, I served as the member. I enjoyed it. They asked me if I'd be willing to return, but I did say that sometimes it's helpful if we rotate because then everyone else gets exposure as well. So I'm happy to stay with it unless someone else has an interest.
I'm interested, but I guess we could do this too. So we could put on the question mark.
You did a great job. I'm just gonna stick with the few I'm on.
Okay.
All right, so Whitney? Communications Committee.
I'll take that. Goes with BCTV and all that.
Okay. So John's gonna be the communications czar.
no kidding.
Ready for it.
I love this.
Community Preservation Committee?
This was also mine this year. I will admit, I don't think I was as attentive to them as I could have been. I only attended 3 meetings. It's really interesting if anyone else is curious to see how that money is used every year. It is 1.5% of our tax money, but I'm happy to stay on as well.
Does anyone want it?
Okay, so,
I'll stick with it.
that's Whitney. Conservation Commission.
If nobody's interested, I might want it.
Do you want that one?
Is anyone else interested?
So far, Jen, all you have is vote.
I know, that's why I'm letting them take all the good stuff.
Council on
Save the best for
Aging.
I am interested in Council on Aging.
Okay, so, and you are as well.
Yeah, but
So I can put a hold on this, we can talk about it, you can think about it, so we can just, in terms of time.
sounds great.
Sure.
Creative Economy Committee,
That one I want.
everybody okay?
Mm-hmm.
Cultural Council.
I'm interested in the Cultural Council. I'm also hearing my voice a lot, so I'm like, how many have I signed up for here?
Well, and I'm seeing you're in a lot of these.
I think the chair of Cultural Council sent an email in, requesting whoever the liaison is with Creative Economy also be their liaison.
I don't think it was requesting, I think
No, it definitely was.
It was a suggestion, I don't know if it was a request.
Yeah, it was a
Yeah.
request.
Probably because of overlap of content.
Yeah.
Does
So,
anyone want it?
Does anyone want it?
That's, I guess, the question. Do
I'm-
you want it?
I'm interested in Cultural Council. But Jen, do you think it would be favorable for you to have
No,
both?
I think it would be fine because it's not, they overlap, they work together in partnership, doesn't mean that you need to know, like, I think it would be good to have 2 separate people actually on the different committees.
Okay, so Whitney?
Sure.
Whitney, I just wanna
What's my
give you a
running
notice
number here?
that you're signing up for a lot. DEI Task
I
Force.
can always walk back some later if I need to.
DEI Task Force,
Nobody wants it? Okay, I'll take it.
okay. It's a great group.
Okay.
Energy and Sustainability Committee,
That's been mine for the past year. They've been a little quieter recently. Happy to keep it unless anyone's interested in helping them. They're interested in some new goal setting.
okay, Whitney. Fair Committee?
Interested?
I'm interested too.
Fight over the
Okay, I'm
fair
gonna put a
committee.
hold on that one.
It's the shake, cattle, and roll that got them going.
Shake out, for sure.
Family Center Committee,
I can stick with them unless
You wanna
anybody's
stay with
interested.
them? Yeah.
Finance Committee.
Interested. If John doesn't,
No,
I'm
I mean, I
interested.
did it for so many years.
I thought
was-
you would
know,
want it.
I think it would,
Yeah,
I agree.
I did it for the past 4 years, so I mean, I'm
Yeah.
fine, but I think it'd be good if somebody had to see the budget or experience that. It's a great
I
budget
enjoyed
that was
going to
used.
those meetings.
Do you wanna take that?
I'd be open to take it if nobody else wants it.
It's yours.
Okay.
Goes to Nicole.
Hazard Mitigation Committee, this is a new committee.
What does it do?
Excuse me?
What does it do?
They're working with the fire department, fire chief on our hazard mitigation plan. So once that plan is done, this committee will probably cease. With your background, that might be a
Yeah,
good
I'll
fit
do it.
for you.
Perfect.
I think it kind of started with what happened up in Ledgewood, right?
The process had already started. They have a grant through the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission to complete that section of the master plan.
Okay, so John is the liaison for that committee. Historic District Bylaw Commission,
Is anybody interested in the historic stuff? Cause I could take that one and the
Sounds good.
historic commission if nobody wants either one of those.
Historical Commission?
Yeah, that's what I'm
Okay.
saying.
Oh, okay, so you put them together.
Lakes Committee.
Again, if no one's interested, I'll take it.
Yeah, that went to Jen had conservation, so it would make sense.
And I have my
So
eye
they
on
go
Parks and
together.
Rec, so.
Just FYI.
Just FYI, yeah.
Oh, I didn't see that coming. Curveball.
McPherson Garden Committee.
Isn't that part of Parks and Rec?
I mean, I'll
No,
take
it's
it too,
separate.
cause it's sort of historic and it's placemaking and it's
Yeah,
creative
and Pat's
and
great.
all of the things.
Memorial Committee.
I'll do that.
Oh, I don't know. Parks, Beach, and Rec.
Watch it
Anybody
find out.
interested?
I'm
Jen?
interested in that one.
Are we okay with that? All right. Planning Board.
And that one I'd be interested in too, if no one else is
Okay, hang on, now we
interested.
need to count on Jen, how many she got?
I didn't take that many.
I think you have more.
It's just all the ones I wanted were on the other pages.
Scholarship Committee.
I'm happy to keep them. Again, unless anyone's like chomping at the bit.
Veteran Services Advisory Board.
I'm interested as the veteran of the board.
Yeah.
And Zoning Board of Appeals.
I can stay on it.
Thank you, Nicole.
How did our numbers
You get a
come
tally.
out?
I don't know, that's a good question.
All right, so we have a couple of polls. Age and dementia and Council on Aging.
I would recommend, if you're both interested in having,
Have one be on
Time.
one
yeah,
and one be on the other.
I'm interested in Council on Aging.
Alright, Age and Dementia Friendly Implementation Group?
Can always trade it next year.
Sure.
Okay, so Nicole is Council on Aging and Whitney is Age and Dementia. All right, and then we have a hold on the Fair Committee.
Can we do a tally between John and I?
How many
Steve,
did I
what do
do?
we got?
Yeah, looks like I'm at 8.
You're at 8, I'm at 10.
Seven.
Got a bunch of new committees this year, didn't we?
Get 1, 2.
6, 7. I have 8 and you have 7.
Yeah.
You can have it.
How did I end up with the
All right.
most?
You just started raising your hand a whole bunch.
What?
Okay,
okay, what was the final outcome on the school committee?
that's gonna be Whitney, and Nicole is gonna be the alternate.
Okay,
Are we am I her alternate or are we co-chair? Are we
No,
co-liaisons?
that's, Whitney is liaison and you will be the alternate if she can't, go to meetings. And she's already indicated that there will be meetings she can't go to. So the Fair Committee is Jonathan.
Yep.
Okay, we have successfully completed the liaisonships.
I do think John brings up a good point, though, especially if we continue to add committees, condensing consolidation might have to be something we talk about. Because it might become unsustainable for us to make it to all these meetings.
Right, right. I think though, we have to keep the people in mind that have been doing this.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Sorry, Steve, do you remember when we changed the duties of the liaisonship? I swear I could recall that, like, we didn't need to go, like, the whole, that we were gonna reach out to the liaison people, let them know that we're available for support, and then,
Yeah.
if they wanted us to attend, that they would ask. I just, that's my recollection, I don't know. I've sort of been treating it that way since we made that change, but maybe I'm wrong about that.
no, I do remember some of that, and I think, every committee has different needs.
Right, exactly.
I think, I would recommend attend a meeting and see what the committee wants.
That's
if they
exactly right.
Need more help or not.
And there are some committees that really are not interested in
Yeah, that's true.
any involvement, thank you very much.
Right.
And others that really value us being at the table, so
Yep.
I agree, just,
No, I just wanted to make sure that we're all.
well,
Right, no, that's
I
fair.
don't think it's a one-size-fit-all.
Oh, no, I agree, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. All right, so, ratify appointment of treasurer collector. What do we need to do, Steve?
So the next two items are the appointment of the treasurer collector and the appointment of the town accountant. Both of those appointments I have made, but they, under the act of legislation, the select board needs to vote to ratify them, so basically approve those appointments. So just a simple motion to
Okay.
approve the appointment of Sarah Mann as the treasurer collector and Jill Rossi as the town accountant.
Do I hear a motion?
Move that we ratify the appointment of Sarah Mann as treasurer collector.
Second.
Can we do both at the same time?
Well, no, I would just take them separately. They're on the agenda separately, I'm
All
sorry.
right, do we have to say what the term is?
Oh. I don't remember now if it's 3 years or 1 year. I didn't write it down. Wonderful. How about if you just say it in accordance with the town manager's appointment? I believe it's 3 years.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
We're not gonna have another meeting before the end of the term, so.
Okay.
yeah.
All right, you want to read
I
that?
move that we ratify the appointment of Sarah Mann as treasurer collector in accordance with the town managers. What?
It seems like we should have a term. Is it 3 years? Mark?
Typically, yes.
Okay.
Typically, they are 3-year terms.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be, so that's why.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
if you're talking about people who've been here for a long time, and you're just renewing, we're
Okay.
probably looking at 3 years.
In accordance with the town manager's appointment.
Of 3 years.
Of 3 years.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't write it down. I
I
just,
move that we ratify the appointment of Sarah Mann as treasurer collector in accordance with the town manager's appointment of 3 years.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed, hearing none, the motion passes.
I move that we ratify the appointment of Jill Rossi as town accountant in accordance with the town manager's appointment of 3 years.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed, hearing none, the motion passes. Okay, right of first refusal. Steve?
so this is the Sakewich property on Cold Spring Street, map 259, lot 29, and a portion of lot 38. As customarily required, we sent this off to both the Planning Board and the Conservation Commission. Both have reported back that they would recommend the Select Board not exercise its right of first refusal. So if the board can simply confirm that tonight through a vote, then we can move on with
Okay,
releasing it.
any discussion? No. Do I hear a motion?
I move that we forego our right to exercise first refusal in regard to Sakewich, Cold Spring Street, map 259, lot 29, and a portion of lot 38.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Okay, now we come to the part in our meeting where we'll start the discussion on goals and objectives. This is an introduction. Who's setting this up? Are you, Steve, or is Mark?
I can start it, and if there's questions, Mark can jump in. So, again, as I mentioned earlier, annually, the Select Board and the Town Manager would sit down and start to talk about goals and objectives, coming up with a list of priorities for the year. This year, I think we're gonna change things up a little bit. We are hoping to have a special meeting, a retreat, if you will, maybe a Saturday morning, where we only talk about this subject. It's the only item on the agenda. It'll probably be in a neutral location, a restaurant somewhere or some other meeting room where we would just have nothing to talk about but goals and objectives. a lot of communities use this format. They do call it a retreat. And basically, we discuss strategy and priorities, and then we come back to a regularly scheduled meeting and approve the final list. I would expect probably no more than 3 of these strategy sessions. I don't think we'll get it done in one because there's a lot to talk about, but it just kind of changes things up a little bit. So in your packet, there's last year's goals and objectives, mostly updated with progress to date. There's also a couple of samples from other communities, Palmer and South Hadley, just so we can kind of look at the formatting a little bit to see if we want to change that up. I also received another one today from Long Meadow or East Long Meadow, and it's very similar to ours. It's not much different than what we're presenting annually. So I think I'll email that to everybody so that you'll have it, and we can talk about how we want to format it. Our formatting has been more of a list, and I think Palmer's has been very detailed on action steps and milestones and those things. So we need to look at that a little bit, and we can talk about all this in the retreat. We'll post an agenda. It'll be a public meeting, but it'll be just for this one purpose. So, did I miss anything, Mark? Or?
I believe so.
Mark is going to be sending out a communication. I'm going to talk a little bit about that so people know what to expect. It'll come to us.
Can you just introduce Mark to the town residents, who he is and why?
Mark.
Sorry.
Who are you? And why are you here?
Thank you.
And why am I here? Apparently, there are multiple reasons today. My name's Mark Terry. I'm the town's labor council. I've worked with the town since 1999 or so. And I've been asked to kind of come in and talk about a couple of topics on your agenda, that we've got an executive session later. So the correspondence that I've been asked to prepare for you is just one that helps the board and town manager understand the relationship based on the new special legislation that was adopted a couple of years ago. I found that it's a practical matter. That legislation comes in, and there are some people who had goals behind it, but then when you go to implement it, sometimes there's some growing pains. And so what I was going to try to do is craft a letter that would help you sort of understand what the intentions were there, but also I think that will tie into some of the conversation we have about goals and objectives, and might help set a foundation for that conversation for you. And I'm committed to getting that correspondence to you by the end of the week.
Thank you, Mark. We'll have a chance to talk about what Mark sends us, but this will give us time to think about it on our own. And if we have questions, prepare them ahead of time for our next meeting. I'll be working with Steve on coming up with an appropriate timeline, but because many of us are new, I think it's best that we make sure that we all understand what the task is at hand before we execute on it. Any questions or comments about what was in our packets tonight? Steve, thank you so much for sending out the third one. Long Meadow?
Yeah, I think it's Long Meadow. I was looking for it now, but I'll do it later.
What made you decide to add in other towns' formats? Was it just your own personal reference?
It was me.
Yeah, one of the,
I asked for it because I wanted to understand how other towns put together. Oh no, I didn't. I didn't ask for that. I asked for.
Might have been Jen.
I asked for.
Somebody had mentioned it.
No, what I wanted was what town managers' offices, the structure of town managers' offices.
Okay,
look
that's a
like.
separate task that Joanne's been working on, but yes.
Okay, so we can expect that too.
Not tonight.
No,
Not on the agenda.
what, you can't just magic make it happen.
So I had heard a comment from one of the board members, and I don't remember who, but that, we should look at our formatting as well, and that's why I pulled some other towns, and I don't remember who it was.
So actually, I believe that was me.
Oh, okay.
Well,
You asked, so you threw me off.
Well, to clarify, I meant formatting specific to this document, not a full overhaul, or just to make it easier on the eyes.
Mhm.
I do have some suggestions, which I know
Okay.
we're not talking about tonight,
Yeah.
Sure,
so.
okay.
But, for what else was given in the packet, any other questions?
Are we scheduling
Not right now.
the
No.
goals and objectives?
And I'm guessing the
No.
goal is to get that done this summer, as soon as possible.
Well, the goal, for me, is to have it done, by the end of July. Sooner if possible, but because, there are so many new people on the board, we wanna make sure everybody has a clear understanding before, we go and execute. So if we get it done sooner, awesome. If we can, if we need till the end of the month, then so be it. We don't wanna bleed into August.
So saying that and hearing that, like, don't you think we should look at what dates are available?
No, I want everybody to take a look at what, legal is doing, not right now, we still have a couple weeks.
I'm saying this
Okay.
because I'm thinking about my own personal calendar and I can't think of a single weekend that we would do this.
Yeah.
That's
I'm having
because,
similar thoughts.
right, so
And
I
look,
think like
I
having
get it.
like a tentative date might be a good idea, but if you feel differently, I don't know how we're gonna do this if we don't start looking at the clock because it's already June, whatever date. What's
June
today?
16th.
The 16th?
How about if we do this, so we don't have to, if, forward blackout dates to Steve, dates you are not available.
Are Sundays an option as well?
Can we do a doodle
I think
poll?
we leave
Yeah,
the
can
whole
we do a
thing
doodle
open.
poll?
Yeah, I can,
Yeah, even better, because it's gonna take too much time.
I'd say
Um,
let's keep Sundays on the table unless anyone has a moral obligation, just because
Duly noted, Whitney.
it might be helpful.
All right, okay, now we're gonna move on to, item F, the CORI SORI policy. So, Steve?
so this is the real reason Mr. Terry is in attendance, to start talking a little bit about the CORI SORI policy and answer some questions, as well as attend our executive session coming up. So in your packets are copies of proposed CORI SORI policies. We are attempting to bring our activity in CORI SORI checks into compliance with Mass General law. We do have some discretion in some areas and none in others. I'll let Mark talk about that a little bit further, but we did a little bit of research, and Joanne was able to find a policy that's about 20 years old. It's labeled a policy, but it's actually just a procedure. So it didn't comply with anything that we could determine, so that's why we're here. So these policies were developed and reviewed by Mark, so he's very familiar with them, and he can answer your questions, and we can talk about what we can and can't do with this. So.
Just by way of overview, the CORI law was amended about 15 years ago. And when they did that, there were certain things that were kind of added into the mix. One of the things was that it used to be that we could ask on an employment application whether somebody's been convicted, and there was a special definition of how you could answer yes or no to that. And the law took that away and said, look, we're trying to make sure that people who have been convicted of something aren't knocked out of the gate from consideration right away. So we can't ask the question at an early stage. But you can ask it later, and you can ask to get a court report. And so the law was amended to put some parameters around that place, sort of how you can do it, when you can do it. And then there was sort of a heftier change to regulations. The policy that you've received aligns with those regulations. It's a model policy that my office developed somewhere around 15 years ago. And we've made some minor tweaks to it over the years just to make it a little bit more user-friendly. I know if you read it, you might not think that it's all legalese, but it's more user-friendly than it was in the first iteration. And so that is, there are, as Steve said, there are some positions that an employer will hire into that you are required to do a CORI check. for example, a police officer, right? Because you are legally prohibited from being a police officer if you've ever been convicted of a felony, right? So you have to run the CORI check. There are others where it's a different level of requirement, like you don't get the same amount of data, but if you're somebody who's been hired to take care of seniors or people who are disabled or children, you can imagine there'd be an expectation there because those groups of people have been considered to be a more vulnerable population. Beyond that, there also is an ability to run CORI checks on people who are contractors to the town and volunteers with the town. And so what I tell people is like, look, you want to have a policy that certainly accounts for employees, right, that you're going to check. And I do encourage people to run a CORI check on every new hire. And the reason for that from a legal perspective is really liability management, right? If a person, for example, has a history of violence, it is too easy these days to have a CORI check done and learn that. And so my opinion is that if we had an employee here, somebody we hired, we didn't do a CORI check, and if we had, we'd find out that they had a history of violence. If something happens here and they assault somebody, you're going to be held liable for that. Whereas if you had no reason to know a person was prone to violence, you may not be held liable. And that's the reason for doing it for really all employees. I think the place to be, to exercise discretion or to have a policy that's a little more flexible is when you look at volunteers, right? Because you all, like every community, want people to be engaged with your government, right? You want those people to volunteer, and you don't want to put barriers to that. Whether that's just the procedural barrier of like signing the form and authorizing the CORI check, or whether it's some people are like, well, look, I might have done something a while ago, but I just don't want people to know about it, right? One thing I will point out is that when you look at CORI data, for the level that you likely would be able to access, if you're looking at volunteers or even regular employees, accepting like the law enforcement is different, you really are getting data that's felonies that are within the last 10 years, misdemeanors within the last 5, and for whatever that's worth, I just share that with you because it's not necessarily you're not getting things from when they were kids. You're never going to see that. But if it's something from 20 years ago, you likely aren't going to get it if the process is working properly. So there is the other piece of the policy is really the procedural component that sort of checks and balances and the rights of the employees or the candidates, where if you get a CORI report and there's something on it, I'm not sure about this. There is a process you have to go through, right? You have to sit with the person, tell them, hey, look, I'm concerned about this report. I'm thinking about taking an adverse action, like I'm not hiring you as an example, and I want to share with you why and understand what happened, right? Like you tell me the story behind it. And then as long as you make a decision that really is reasonably related to the person's job, for example, you might not worry about a criminal conviction of embezzlement for a person who has no access to money, right? But you're probably going to worry about a crime of violence that occurred fairly recently for any position. And it just requires a case-by-case analysis. That's what the policy really lays out. And the SORI policy really is very much the same. So, I know, like I said, volunteers are the place where I think communities look at it differently. And I think that's fair, I think to consider when you want to do it. Because if you did it for every volunteer to the town, that would be a lot, right? It would just logistically be a lot. What I encourage people to think about is, when are you potentially going to have volunteers working with a member of those vulnerable populations without some other supervision from somebody who has been CORI checked? So like, give an example. If you have somebody volunteering in the senior center and they're going to deliver meals to someone at home, right? They're volunteer, they do it all on their own. And because of that, they're likely to have access to a senior's home. That is a person in a vulnerable population. You probably want to treat that a little bit differently than somebody who's on the town fair committee or something like that, or an appointed member of a different body that sits at this table that you do or similar. So that's the overview I'd give you in terms of what we're trying to do with these policies. It's been a while since I looked at that. I don't recall whether we specifically addressed when different people would be CORI. The policy really is designed around having the framework in place to run CORI checks and what it looks like if you're going to do it, more than making the distinction around you will do it in this circumstance, we won't do it in that. I would say that if we're going to modify it anyway to sort of look at categories of volunteers as an example, we wanna be consistent on that, right? That's important, because otherwise you just open yourself up to all sorts of claims. But if you were to say, you know, by definition, anybody who's volunteering in a place where they have unsupervised access to a person in category A, B, C, D, E, and do that consistently, I think that's, you know, a reasonable kind of policy to adopt, instead of, let's just CORI everybody. Okay, so let me pause there and see if there are specific questions about the policy. It does look like you've got the more detailed one that I think I drafted and worked on with Joanne a while ago.
What is this that you handed to us?
This is something that Steve handed to me about 5 minutes before we started.
So how is this different from this, or is it? It's different.
Correct. Those were notes that I received from the chair. You sent me that in an email? Right?
Oh, this
Okay.
is the thing I sent. Yeah. All right. This is a lighter version of CORI and SORI. But I will say in full, and I'll start with this. When I first read about this, I thought, oh my gosh, this feels like government overreach. And so I went online and actually just did this through ChatGPT. Said, give me, what a standard CORI SORI looks like, and this is what came up. And so what you really need to know about it is that it applies to employees, contractors under highlights of policy, certain volunteers and appointed officials whose roles involve trust, access, or risk. So for like financial positions, or if you're working with kids, or the like, that what I saw this, I wanted to talk last, so but what I saw what was put in front of us from the town as sort of a blunt instrument, and to me it seemed like it needed to be a little more nuanced. Now, and I had the opportunity to talk with Mark, and I have a greater appreciation, especially from a liability standpoint, why he's advising the town to adopt a more stringent CORI SORI. But I do think that there's got to be a little gray area so that we're open to people who want to volunteer or serve on a committee and are not necessarily might maybe drive people away because of a mistake they made 20 years ago, or whatever it is, and understanding from you, Mark, that that what shows up on a CORI, and that's different from a SORI, I would assume.
I didn't honestly double check the time frame on the SORI today. I went back, because you and I did speak, and I went and looked at I printed something out from the state agency that does this, that just has the chart of what's there, and that's where I found the language for just the standard access, which is what you would get when you're dealing with the sort of non-required, right, discretionary, what would be reported. So murder, manslaughter, sex offense, disposition is a conviction, that'll show up, I think, forever. If it's a misdemeanor, disposition is conviction, indeed, this is very technical, less than 5 years, it'll return the offense and all other convicted offenses. And then if the offense is a felony with a conviction and the incarceration was less than 10 years ago, it'll return the offense and all the convicted, or if the offense is pending. Like, that's sort of the basics of what you will get. So it's more heavily focused on either pending or conviction, right? Charges won't show up on that. If if you do something like for law enforcement or schools, not that that's your
Yeah.
responsibility, they'll see charges. They'll see everything back to, when a person became an adult. And so that was something, because I know you expressed that concern, and I think the only things you're likely to see from 20 years ago are very, very serious offenses.
Right.
Now, that doesn't mean your concern isn't valid. It doesn't mean that you don't assess, do we need to do a CORI for a person who's going to be appointed to your conservation commission if that's an appointment, right?
Yeah.
And like I said, you can make your judgment about the volunteer role and decide some roles it's more important than others. I think that's, there is room for gray, in that, because if a person's volunteering at a board, just like the 5 of you are here as elected people, but if you were appointed, you're entitled to run for office, right? You're entitled to get elected regardless of what's on that CORI. Sorry, I'm not suggesting anything.
I'm sorry, I don't understand what you mean.
What I mean by that is, look, if people are on an appointed board,
Yeah.
right, they present no different risk than somebody who's been elected, right? And you can get elected no matter what your CORI is. But the other part is, what's your role? You're sitting in a meeting like this, and if there's not the interaction, the unsupervised interaction with vulnerable populations as identified by the statute and the regulations, rather you're sitting in a meeting, right? And a person who's got some sort of criminal background, maybe they're walking in our community every day and don't present risks. So my point really being, if you want to focus on volunteers and where that line is focus on what they're asking to do as a volunteer and figuring out when might there be some risk to somebody else, as opposed to just a person who chooses to attend a meeting that you can do as a citizen. Somebody can come in, and of course you don't CORI up for that. So that's it goes back to the original point, right? Just thinking about what are the volunteer roles where there's a legitimate concern, and considering where you want to draw that line in terms of who's going to get CORI for volunteer roles as opposed to who is not, and
So
not
that-
the person but the role.
The volunteer piece could maybe go along what evidently I
I think when I looked at that,
like fiduciary or working with vulnerable populations, and I guess it's how do you hold the two things, right? Not all, either all volunteers or not all volunteers, but where's the line?
Yeah.
And
I do think what you have in this document, the other one
Yeah.
we're looking at, as sort of a framework is pretty close to what I'd be thinking about. I may play with the words a little bit or something like that. I don't know how many roles you have that are volunteer and have that sort of financial access, right? You may have somebody on a finance committee,
yeah,
right? But they're just being given public data anyway. It's not that they have their hands with access to the accounts, right? It's just looking at budgets and sort of bigger financial pictures. If I were worried about fiduciary capacity, if I were worried about embezzlement, I'd be worried about people who have access to funds, bank accounts, whether it's electronic or I don't know, towns even have cash in the building anymore. So I wouldn't even be overly concerned about those types of things unless the role really involved having the potential for access to stuff that is, real money. I think the bigger issue is the vulnerable populations, and that's where I would encourage the board to say, we're gonna do the most we can to protect people while being reasonable, and think about how many people you're talking about too. I think that's important, right? You could be talking about 12 volunteers, and you could be talking about 400 volunteers, depending on how you draw those lines. But I do think that what you outlined in this other document, I think is a reasonable starting point
yeah.
in terms of where to draw those lines.
Is it important to have consistency in who you CORI? Because what if you CORI'd someone, you didn't offer them a position, but they were aware of another department that doesn't get CORI'd? Does that person who got CORI'd have any kind of legal recourse to say, hey, you did it for me, why aren't you doing it for this group of people?
I think you need to be consistent by role, right? So if so my recommendation is you CORI all employees, all roles, okay? But let's just say for the sake of argument, you chose not to do that. If you were going to hire for the DPW, you'd say, I'm either going to CORI those folks or I'm not going to CORI those folks. by role, by department. Police, as I said, legally you have to do it for law enforcement. I would make those distinctions. I agree with you. Like, I would not want to do that. I'm going to do this candidate for that position, but not this candidate for the same position. That, I think, opens up a can of worms, and I think could really expose the town to liability quite quickly, because there's no basis for that, right? Either you're concerned about whether somebody has a criminal background for a particular role or not. There's no reason to differentiate.
Does this policy take effect, like, I guess I'm just throwing out there, if we vote on a policy and all the current employees would have to take this and sign this policy? So if somebody's been with the town for 20 years and they don't wanna sign the CORI check, would we have to fire them, or what's the process in that? I'm just
Yeah,
curious,
no,
because they've been
it's
here
a
for 20
great
years, I'm
question.
just throwing it out there.
So there are two different approaches. One is to CORI somebody when they come in, and then you're done. I think probably the wiser approach is to do periodic re-CORIs of people and address that in policy. Schools, again, legally required, have to do it every 3 years. I think that's a good time frame because you don't know, right? You don't know what happens unless somebody shares it with you. So having a policy that requires that to happen every 3 years, and that would be if that's something we haven't been doing. If we're going to do that with our unionized employees, we have to negotiate that change of policy, and every time 3 years rolls around, for people who are non-union, that becomes a condition of employment. Like, you're going to have to sign the authorization form, so we can redo it. And if they chose not to, yes, we have to deal with that as a potential removal. But it is good practice. And I think it's worth noting, just this didn't come up yet. CORI information only gives you state information. You're only getting the records from Massachusetts, right? That feels a little different if you're in Texas, in the middle of the state, and you got to go a long way away. But here, where our states are so small, if somebody gets convicted of something based on offense in New Hampshire, Connecticut, what have you, CORI is not going to tell you that, right? And that's just a reality. I'm not suggesting you do anything about that. If you wanted to, there are private companies out there that will do nationwide searches. For a fee, of course, but you know, that's another layer. I tend to take the view that doing a CORI alone at the state level is appropriate and sufficient. If you were concerned about it, you could certainly do the other. You could expand it. But
My next question is, what happens if we miss someone? Say we do the volunteer, we miss some of these, I don't know, I'm just throwing something like finance, for some reason,
Yeah.
finance committee, we didn't CORI you because we felt it didn't happen, and something happened, who's liable?
so if it kind of depends on what happened and what the CORI check has shown. So take two different scenarios. If you have a regular routine of doing everybody, and there was a mistake, like you just missed somebody, they slipped through the cracks. You know, I think that is a little bit of a different story than if for some reason it was deliberate that person wasn't CORI'd, or if you were to look at, we just decided not to do it at all. Picking finance and thinking about like economics is a little bit different. I think the better example is the sort of propensity for violence, because what that presents is not necessarily a risk to the town as an entity, but to another individual, right? So if you use, pick somebody on the finance committee, it doesn't, it's not a great example, but I'll just use it. Somebody on the finance committee has a CORI, we decide to do it, and it shows that they've got 3, 4, 5 convictions for assault, right? It's all battery. So that would say to you, this person has got something going on where they use violence. Right, that's okay. You know, the finance position, we're really more worried about the money. We're going to put the person on the board anyway. Then you have a finance committee meeting where it gets heated and the person resorts to violence, right? The scenario you're in is basically similar to what's called negligent retention or negligent hiring, right? The cases are much clearer on the hiring than the volunteer, but just play it out. The liability that would flow to the town is that, hey, look, you knew that this person was likely to act violently in some circumstance. You knew they had a propensity for it, and sure enough, it played out, and as a result, the other member of the commission got hurt. So that person files a lawsuit against the town saying, you contributed to this problem, you put somebody in that seat with a propensity for violence, and sure enough, they were violent towards me, and I got harmed because of it. It doesn't matter really whether it's this kind of scenario or it's an employee interacting with a citizen. That's the nature of the case, is really one where you knew or should have known of the risk. That risk was realized in some violent act, and a harm resulted to somebody. That person has the ability to file suit against the town for that.
Makes sense.
If the town were ever deemed liable for something, do we have an insurance policy that covers that, or are we looking at our operating budget?
No, most towns are insured for many different types of claims, right? You have a general liability policy. And so most likely, there is insurance coverage for that. You probably, like every town that I'm aware of, have some sort of retention or deductible on it. So, it might be, some towns it's $7,500, sometimes it's $50,000. Kind of depends on the number of claims you have and the policy you hold. There's going to be something there, that's going to be an expense. And you would have insurance counsel defending you, so you wouldn't be paying for my services or the town council services, most likely. But doesn't mean you're not going through that. Doesn't mean that it's not a significant concern for the town. It doesn't mean you're not involved in litigation. And if you can avoid that, that's what you want to do.
Can I ask an operational question? I'm assuming there's a fee with the CORI check, even if it's nominal. There's nothing.
No, we don't.
The state
no,
pays for it in full?
Yeah. Well, I don't know who pays for it. We're not charged for it.
The town's not charged for it? Okay, well, that's great. My second reason in asking that is thank you for explaining why there are various levels of CORIs based on vulnerable population involvement or not, because I know many of our volunteers in town will say, oh, well, I don't need to do a CORI check because I'm already CORI checked through the schools. So that was my other question is there a way for us to find a way to streamline it more, or do they need to be separate?
School department really operates kind of independently from the general government. I've not had that question come up, so I've never really looked at it. I can tell you I represent schools, I represent towns, and I've always handled them separately, and there is one reason for that is the confidentiality around CORI records, right? So there's supposed to be kind of the silo of you only look at it, only people who need to look at it can look at it, and the people who are kind of in that need to know category are the ones involved in making the decision, right, about whatever the person is going to volunteer for, or hired for, or considered for. That doesn't tend to cross over, you kind of go across the street, so to speak. So I've never really looked at the question of whether, no, we did it on the town side, it covers the schools, we did it on the school side, it covers the town. I'd have to look at it further. I don't know if operation, have you ever had that come up?
I've had lots of folks ask about that, and the schools won't share their.
Yeah, no, they wouldn't be able to
records.
share it. It's,
And they won't tell me either way.
yeah.
So
And I understand you shared that it's more detailed what the schools receive because of the vulnerable population.
That's
I
right.
guess that's just triggering me because we do CORIs now for Parks and Rec, so if you volunteer for a sports team already in town, so who tracks that?
I do that.
So you do that. So we already have something, it sounds like, some kind of policy, I guess, right?
The rec department does CORIs annually on all of that's their internal policy.
So we don't have, so it's different than the,
Yes, so that's part of the reasoning behind instituting a policy that affects all of the departments, so we're all following the same rules.
And
Makes
am I correct that you've largely been doing what this policy, the draft policy I provided, says? You just haven't had the policy in place to back it up?
Correct,
Yeah.
right, and we have, but I've been here 3 years,
Right.
so it would be the appropriate time to do a 3-year renew, and we haven't done that.
So what departments are you taking care of? Rec, police?
All town,
Everything except the
with
schools.
every
with
department.
the exception of the schools, yep.
Okay, let me rephrase that. So are you currently doing CORIs on all new hires right now?
Yes.
Employees? Okay, but you're not doing the periodic?
The rec department monitors their employees and submits new CORIs annually on all of their staff, and I will process those.
Okay,
The same goes with the Council on Aging. They do the same for their volunteers. But all of them are housed with me, I process them, and I keep them under lock and key.
okay. And, sorry, one more question. Are you the only one doing CORIs?
For the town, yes.
Okay. I thought I saw coming out of Finnerty, the executive assistant position doing CORIs.
They're a backup to me.
Okay,
Initially, before I came here, they were the office that handled the quarries.
okay.
I'm glad you asked that question, Nicole, too, because what I was thinking is even though it doesn't cost us anything, it's obviously still a use of your time, which it does have a value for us.
And it's a lot. It can be a lot sometimes, yes.
So what are we looking to vote on this policy, or are we looking to change it? I guess I don't know, just talk about it tonight?
At least my understanding is it sounds like you want a little bit further of a definition of which volunteers would be CORIs.
Or just, a little more nuance.
Are you comfortable with the
Which
choice?
actually is what the second one does talk about. Roles deemed ceremonial or low risk may be exempted at the discretion of the town manager or designee. There's, if you look under applicability, that kind of spells out.
Can I suggest, just to help
Yes.
you move forward with this? So I have sort of some notes and mental feedback of what you, I
Yes.
think you all seem to be pointing in the same direction. I'm not hearing major disagreement among the board. I think it sounds like you're not looking to do a CORI check on every volunteer. That something along the lines of what you've got in that policy is appropriate for defining sort of vulnerable populations that you're going to be more concerned about. I have seen the document, the other document that was shared with me a week ago, maybe, Steve. And I wasn't sure of its origin, excuse me. But I think I can try to weave in some of the things that are in there into the model that we've given you. I do recommend that you keep the level of detail that we have in our draft as a sort of your starting point, just because I know it's technically sound. It lays out the process, and that policy this isn't like some other policies that get circulated. They do, but it's not like a compliance-based policy for every employee that they have to worry about making sure they follow like a code of conduct, right? It's not that kind of disciplinary policy. It's really a policy of the town that kind of governs how Joanne operationalizes this. And then when it's used, it's usually given to an employee who has something pop up on their CORI that we're talking to them about. That's when they're entitled to get a copy of the policy. So it is something that will live and breathe, but it's not necessarily something that I think is, that I worry as much about being readable. Because I think the version you put together, in a lot of ways, it's simpler, and I'm not sure it's losing a lot, but there are a lot of the little details, and I'm happy to try to streamline it if you'd like, but I think the bigger picture.
I think that would be a great idea, unless anybody else.
Yeah, no, I
Opposition
was
to that.
gonna say, this is the document I'm comfortable with because you drafted it. If there are particular things within here that are bothersome to you or that you would wanna see changed, I'd rather you go in here and say, I don't like this, than I don't even wanna consider this, honestly.
Well, honest with you, I don't wanna decide legally. I actually want him to take this, and if you could, just, pop in red like any changes.
Yeah, I'll do it all direct.
Yeah, it
So are
doesn't.
you saying you want him to use this as the
No,
foundation?
no,
You do
no,
want
the
him to use
foundation
this?
is that.
Okay, then that's fine.
And the subtle nuances would, he's saying that this is a good,
Okay,
yeah, and,
as long as this is our foundation, I'm fine with that.
yeah.
Right, when is your next meeting, just so I can try to have it ready for you by then?
July 7th.
July 7th,
So-
yeah. And the only other thing, does it make sense to have a memo that explains to folks what comes up on a CORI? Just like, hi, yes, this is, so that they know ahead of time, so that folks are understanding of,
So
look,
they
if
can
something
make it, I think,
happened 30 years
Yeah.
ago, or I would think that might set people at ease.
I think what you're going for is before somebody signs on to something, they should know what might be released in response to it, And if they say, oh geez, I don't wanna do that, they don't sign the authorization and they go elsewhere by their own
Right.
choosing, right?
Yeah,
I think we can add something into that. I'm trying to think about how best to present that in the course of what the normal documentation would be, so maybe you and I can talk a little bit
Mhm.
about that.
Okay.
And then one of the challenges on it is it varies a little bit, right,
Yeah.
by role,
yeah.
but you can have this document available in some way that kind of outlines what it would be. What's hard about this is it just talks about like required 1, required 2, required 3, required 4. Those are the ones where you have to do the CORI check, but it also doesn't state what that category is. We know what that is,
Yeah.
but
So
the
just
person being,
like a memo
I think that-
that's user-friendly, it's not, that kind of goes with it.
And this may be obvious, but is this a place and time where we would standardize length of rechecking CORIs so that everyone's every 3 years?
I absolutely would.
So you feel like every 3 years is adequate for some of these positions?
I do, and where I'm lifting that from is that's what the statute says on the school side. Like that, it's a good definition, right? If you're talking about what's sort of statutorily quote good enough for people who are dealing with children of all ages and all abilities, like that just is a good benchmark. You could do it every year, you could do it every 2. I'd never recommend anybody go beyond 3. So, if you guys are saying like, you really wanna be extra careful about this, you wanna do it annually like the rec department currently is, you could do that. But that would be another kind of nuance we have to talk about in terms of the consistency, right? Cause we wanna have consistent approach, and if we're gonna do it, a recheck at different variations depending on the role, I just wanna understand that so that I can address it, that's all.
Joanne, how long does it take you to run a CORI and a SORI on one person?
To run it, I mean, you're just putting in some basic data information. It's the return of the results that sometimes can vary, but it's pretty quick. It just takes a few minutes.
So on that point, is there a sense of the board that you'd like to see some variation on that or just consistency?
I don't know, I mean, when I first read it, I thought every 3 years, a lot can happen in 3 years with certain positions, so that was just concerning, but if that's the standard, I mean, I would defer to you.
Yeah, I think it is, and like I said, this isn't perfect, in the sense that something happens in Connecticut yesterday. It's never gonna show up, right? So I think unless or until the town wanted to invest the time and money of doing like the federal background checks by using an outside company, and those aren't super expensive, but I think it adds up, and it might be $50 or $75 a check. And then there's some other procedural layers that go with that. That's why I'm not pushing you to do that, but I think when you think about like look, this is kind of what we can do. It's accessible. It's almost too easy not to do it. That's where I think the CORI check is right now. Okay. So when we put it for 3 and as you guys deliberate it later and want to nuance it, we can sort of make further changes later.
Joanne, when would you end up using admin staff I don't understand why they would run CORI checks rather than you.
No other person does it. Oh, you mean in my backup?
Yeah,
I can't think of a scenario. I guess if I was incapacitated.
As I say, that's where I've seen it, is
Okay.
if the person who's typically doing it is on maternity leave or
Okay,
FMLA and they're out for 3 months.
and
Can't wait that
you
long.
need to hire somebody,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
that makes sense. All right. And the only other person that would know is the town manager.
Only if there's a reason to know.
Right.
Oh, okay.
The town manager doesn't see or review every report, only when necessary.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions on that? So we'll get
Yeah, I can get you
Table
back,
one,
a draft back,
Steve put this
Before
on
the
the
July
agenda
4th
for the
holiday.
next meeting, and thank you. Um,
We're up to town manager's report.
Yes, town manager's report.
So I am going to just defer to the board. If
Yeah.
there's anything you want me to talk about, I will, but the only thing I wanted to point out is we did, open bids for Sportshaven. We finally have prices that we can work with. I am working with KP Law right now on a bid award. We are hoping to have construction going on this season. If you want more of an update, I can email the board members the information, but, just so you know, it looks like that we're finally moving forward. I am gonna be scheduling some tours. I know John's already been down there. I don't know if anybody else has or has interest. So feel free to reach out. We can take a ride.
Is that in your car or walking around?
No, I'll drive. Yep.
Okay,
I'll
so
drive.
I've already done that, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I'd like to do that. We
Yeah.
talked about that.
Absolutely. So unless there's other questions on my report, I'll move on in the interest of
I
time.
just wanna know when the bid closes on Franklin School.
Yep, that's, in my updates, so I'll move into number 7. There's really nothing here I wanna bring up except surplus property. Yes, we opened bids today for Franklin School. I have copies of the 3 bids received for all the board members tonight. It's not on the agenda for discussion. This is your homework, if you will. You can read through these. We have 3 very distinct proposals. We have 3 prices that range from $100,000 to $150,000. So you can look at those proposals. I will advise the board that we reserve the right to award to the proposal that meets the needs of the town, in your opinion, the best. So when you read through these, you can do what you will. Please, if you have questions, direct them to me. I will probably schedule this for an executive session discussion on the 7th, so we can talk about it in greater detail as a group. It's a lot to go through, so I didn't want you to have to try to do it all that night. So that's all I have on that.
Yeah, everybody's okay with that? Is there anything else on the report you want?
I just wanted to know while we're talking, town property, any updates on 6 and 8?
Not at this time. I will be meeting tomorrow night with the Buildings and Grounds Committee. We did submit a grant for the infrastructure for those buildings, but as far as any reuse or redevelopment, there hasn't been any movement on that. The Buildings and Grounds Committee is also looking at the list of 191 properties. I'm hoping they'll have some guidance tomorrow on what they want to surplus and which shouldn't be surplus, and then from there I'll circulate that to the department heads that should be involved with the decisions.
And so, when did you say they'll have the list of the 190? I imagine that's quite a task.
Yeah, I don't know, I wasn't at the last meeting, so I don't know if they were given good instructions, but
They
really, yeah, okay, so they might not be complete with it.
You're not gonna get anything.
I'm not gonna get anything, okay. So I may try to redirect that. Really, with the town owning open space, it really should be some sort of a threshold. I will probably ask them to take a look at properties that are under 5 acres or maybe 10 acres, because those larger parcels we probably wanna keep for open space. And that would narrow the list down quite a bit. I think the only one that, there's been some grumbling about is whether they should sell the town hall, but I told them no.
The town hall?
Okay, on that note,
Can I ask a question? I'm
Oh,
sorry.
sure.
Our liaison chips, do those start July 1st or right away?
Good question.
I think they start right away, so I
Okay.
will get the
Well,
memos
'cause-
out,
Okay,
because the board, the makeup of the board has changed, so,
right,
Yeah.
okay,
Ed Bosher can't be the liaison.
that's true.
what?
I mean, we could probably call him, but I don't know if he'd pick up his phone.
Okay. Now may I go on to the review
Yes.
of weekly mail? Does anyone have anything they want to say about weekly mail?
I do.
Yes.
What is the invite to comment letter from EDI regarding the fire department project?
I don't know, but
And it can wait if you don't, if you're not sure.
Yeah, that'll have to wait.
Okay.
I don't know on that one. We'll have to
Alright.
wait on that one, sorry.
Can you bring that back up then, next meeting.
Sure.
Any other?
Number 9, Dwight Days is this weekend on Saturday.
That's right. Okay. Individual board reports, Whitney.
I am very simple. Just on June 4th, I attended the Joint Leadership Strategy Group with Nicole. That is the meeting group where we have a couple members in the school committee, and now we've added the finance committee to continue working on a relationship and forward planning. And it went well. We mostly talked about budgets. And that's it.
Okay. Jen?
I don't know what I did last week. Next week, I think we have a meeting. So we have the DLTA, the District Local Technical Assistance Project. Our consultant comes back, so hopefully that project will start moving again. For those who may not know, it's the implementation matrix of the master plan. So I'm hoping that we'll get some good information so that we can use it for our goals and objectives conversation. And also our town planner reached out to the Quabog Chamber so we can start talking to them.
Excellent.
And Dwight Days.
And what?
Dwight Days.
And Dwight Days on
Oh, and I
Saturday.
went to the Lafayette thing, but you're gonna talk about the Lafayette.
Oh, I'm not gonna say very much at all.
It was so cute. I loved it.
It was fun.
Yeah.
John?
I met with the town manager of our transfer station improvements, possibly bringing up some new ideas. There's contracts are coming redo this coming year, so I'm trying to work out some things there. So as I get more on that, I just want to fill you in on that. I attended the recount for a little bit. That was a good process. The town worked hard on it. Terry put a lot of work into it. The employees came out, so it was a lot of work for that. So just let everyone know that. Good by them. I did Trash Gala. We didn't mention that. Trash Gala was a lot of fun, actually.
Super fun.
It was very creative. All the work that went into that was awesome. Meeting the artists, everything. So it was very intriguing, actually. It was a lot. We had a runway show. It was really fun.
Yeah, they want to do it again next
Yeah, I think it was fun. We should probably work on getting the dumpster painted now at this point. Match everything. And today I started working with Rep. Saunders about the well issue that's going on in Belchertown. So I'm trying to see how many people are affected by the well issue in town. I know I got my water tested. I'm living in that neighborhood. Jan's getting her water tested, I think it was. So that's something we need to monitor with the Board of Health.
Yeah.
I
I'm
mentioned
getting
to
my
Steve.
water tested.
Mentioned to Steve about that, so we need to reach out and kind of see how many people in town are affected by that, and let the townspeople know what's going on with that more.
Do we know how widespread this is? No.
Not necessarily. I believe that the area that is of concern is around the Turkey Hill area, so Route 21 to the Granby line back to Route 202. I live within that zone, so I need to have my water
So
tested.
are you just voluntarily getting your water tested?
Yes.
I'm doing this, I'm doing this because
You didn't get a letter.
I'm paranoid. So I just wanna make sure my water's good. I don't know if you're doing it.
I don't have a letter, but I'm in the paranoid camp. We're going to do it also.
Yeah, just to be on the safe side.
The Board of Health did send letters to all the residencies within the area of concern, and I would imagine as results come back, that area of concern could grow or it could shrink.
Right.
But right now, it was targeted. And again, I'm due to have that test as well.
Is the Board of Health tracking that? That's probably a different discussion, but that would be something we could brief
Oh, I
on.
have no
Like
idea.
how many residents are affected, how many homes are affected
It was
in
a
town.
private test, so I have no idea. Did they say?
I can
exactly?
ask if they have an update for us.
Okay.
And maybe that's something we can report out to the town.
Okay.
Anything else?
That's it.
Excellent. Nicole?
So June 4th, we had our joint leadership strategy and planning meeting. I just want to go a little bit deeper with that. So last meeting is we're kind of doing like budget 101 on the town government side. We're probably going to have a couple more meetings to that effect, and then we're going to jump into budget 101 on the school side so that we are all understanding these budgets inside and out. And then we're going to move on to other topics. June 11th, I attended the branding committee meeting. As you know, our logo is done. We're working on getting final renditions of the town seal together to get that approved, and then also we need to start talking about rules, putting rules in place for, you know, employees and for the public on when it's appropriate to use logo versus seal and what the process is for that.
That's great. Well, I met with legal, and I met with Steve, and then I met with legal and Steve. And then for fun, I attended the farewell tour of the Marquis de Lafayette, which was, I think, an absolutely wonderful event. And was honored to read the proclamation. It was, people came in period detail and costumes, and the actor who played Lafayette was elegant and debonair. Took his role very seriously. I think that people who attended learned a lot about what a remarkable man Lafayette was, and the causes that, you know, he spent his life defending. So, yeah, that was a good event. Okay, any questions from the press?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. We are going to move into executive session. So, who reads this?
Nicole does.
Nicole
Oh,
reads
it's your
this.
first one.
Yep.
Yeah.
I move we enter into executive session, not to return to open session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21, Subsection 2, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, or to conduct collective bargaining sessions or contract negotiations with non-union personnel May 16th, 2025, police union disciplinary grievance, and subsection 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigation position of the public body, and to chair so declares May 16th, 2025 police union disciplinary grievance.
Okay, great. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we need a roll call vote, actually, excuse me, Whitney?
Aye.
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 The chair should declare that we.
And we have a 5-0 vote to go into executive session.
The
Thank you.
declaration being that if we were in